You are lying in bed when something moves in the corner of the room. Your heart begins to race, your muscles tighten, and for a moment, the harmless shadow of a coat looks like a person silently watching you. Then you turn on the light. The threat disappears instantly, although nothing in the room has actually changed. So why can darkness transform a familiar place into something frightening? Fear of the dark is one of the most widespread human fears. It appears in almost every culture, affects children around the world, and can remain with us long into adulthood. The reason begins with a simple biological problem. Humans do not see particularly well in darkness. Our eyes can adapt to low light, but we lose much of our ability to recognize colors, details, distances, and movements accurately. Even familiar surroundings suddenly become uncertain. In daylight, the brain receives a constant stream of visual information. It can identify a doorway, a tree, or another person within seconds and decide whether there is any danger. In darkness, much of that information disappears. The brain is left with incomplete shapes, unfamiliar sounds, and large areas it cannot clearly understand. But the brain does not simply wait for better information. It constantly tries to predict what is happening around us, using memories and expectations to fill in the missing details. This ability is extremely useful. It allows us to react quickly without carefully analyzing every movement, sound, or shadow we encounter. However, when visual information is limited, those predictions become less reliable. A hanging jacket may resemble a person, moving curtains may look like reaching arms, and a quiet creak may sound like approaching footsteps. This is related to pareidolia, the tendency to recognize familiar patterns in vague or random images. It is the reason we see faces in clouds, rock formations, and sometimes in the darkest corner of a bedroom. The human brain is especially sensitive to faces and body shapes. Detecting another person quickly has always been important, whether that person was a friend, a stranger, or a possible attacker. From an evolutionary perspective, assuming that a shadow might be dangerous was often safer than ignoring it. A false alarm cost our ancestors only a few moments of fear. Failing to detect a real predator, however, could cost them their lives. Natural selection therefore favored individuals who became more cautious when they could not clearly see their surroundings. For most of human history, darkness genuinely increased the risk of danger. Predators hunted at night, enemies could approach unseen, and even a simple fall or injury was harder to avoid without light. Humans were also physically disadvantaged compared with many nocturnal animals. Cats, owls, and other night hunters developed senses that allow them to navigate and hunt in extremely low light. Our ancestors had fire, shelters, weapons, and the protection of a group. But their natural night vision remained limited, making darkness a signal that the environment was harder to control. That ancient warning system is still active today. It does not automatically recognize that we are inside a locked home, surrounded by walls, technology, and electric lights. When the brain detects a possible threat, the amygdala helps activate the body's fear response. Stress hormones increase alertness, the heart beats faster, and the muscles prepare to fight, escape, or remain completely still. In darkness, this alarm system can become more sensitive because uncertainty itself feels threatening. When the brain cannot identify the source of a sound, it often prepares for the worst possible explanation. This is why a small noise at night can feel far more alarming than the same noise during the day. A branch touching a window may be ignored in sunlight but interpreted as an intruder after midnight. Nighttime silence can make this effect even stronger. Without normal daytime activity, distant pipes, wooden floors, wind, and household appliances suddenly become noticeable. The darkness does not necessarily create more sounds. It simply removes many of the sights and background noises that would normally help us understand them. Our imagination then begins to fill the empty space. And because fear is designed to protect us, the brain often chooses a dangerous explanation before considering a harmless one. Fear of darkness is especially common in children because their understanding of reality is still developing. Young children can imagine monsters and invisible creatures without fully separating those images from genuine possibilities. They also have less experience with ordinary nighttime sounds and shadows. Something an adult recognizes immediately may feel completely mysterious to a child. At the same time, children begin to understand that the world contains real dangers. They know enough to imagine what might happen, but not always enough to judge how unlikely those events are. Stories, legends, and films can give these fears a recognizable form. Ghosts, monsters, and hidden intruders become symbols for something much older, the fear of a threat we cannot see. Almost every culture has stories about beings that appear after sunset. These legends may differ, but they often share the same basic warning: stay close to safety when darkness falls. Horror films deliberately exploit this ancient instinct. They hide threats outside the frame, use darkness to conceal important details, and let the audience imagine what might be waiting beyond the visible scene. What we cannot see is often more frightening than what is revealed. Once a monster becomes clearly visible, the brain can begin to analyze it. An unseen threat has no fixed shape, size, or limitation. It can become whatever the imagination fears most. There is also a deeper psychological reason why darkness can feel uncomfortable. Vision gives us a sense of control, allowing us to understand our surroundings and plan our next action. Darkness takes some of that control away. We become less certain about where things are, what is approaching, and whether an escape route is clear. This helps explain why even people who are not normally afraid of the dark may feel uneasy in an unfamiliar forest, an empty building, or a street without lights. The fear is not always about darkness itself. It is often about what darkness might be hiding. For most people, this reaction is mild and disappears when a light is switched on. But an intense and persistent fear of darkness is sometimes called nyctophobia. A person with nyctophobia may avoid dark rooms, struggle to sleep without lights, or experience panic when visibility is reduced. The fear can continue even when the person logically knows there is no immediate danger. In such cases, the brain has learned to connect darkness with a powerful threat response. Professional support and gradual exposure can help weaken that connection over time. For ordinary nighttime unease, familiarity often reduces fear. Once the brain identifies the creaking floor, moving curtain, or glowing electronic display, uncertainty is replaced by an explanation. This is also why a small night light can feel so reassuring. It does not need to illuminate the entire room. Even a little visual information gives the brain enough detail to recognize objects, understand the environment, and regain a sense of control. Yet our fear of darkness should not be seen simply as a weakness. It is the modern echo of a survival system that protected human beings for thousands of generations. The same brain that invents frightening shapes in the shadows also allows us to detect possible danger before we fully understand it. Today, that alarm may react to an empty hallway or a coat hanging on a chair. But long ago, taking that shadow seriously could have meant the difference between survival and death. Darkness frightens us because it removes certainty. And when the human brain cannot see what is there, it remembers all the things that could be. So the next time a shadow in your room appears to move, remember that you are experiencing an ancient conflict between knowledge and instinct. You may know that nothing is watching you, but somewhere deep inside your brain, a much older voice is still telling you to turn on the light. Subscribe to WunderAtlas World and discover more fascinating mysteries hidden within our minds, our history, and the world around us. Until the next wonder.